Well, it's 6:01. Why don't we get going? Oh,
Hoping I can answer.
the agenda, next thing is flag, the flag is to my right. Stand. Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will do the roll call first, and then on the budget committee, if when we get through you folks, if you could introduce yourself and just tell us what you do in town, and maybe that's something else, Okay, so let's see, on board, Nathan, got Nathan and Mary Schilling. Harold Yardley, not here. Dallas Peenbrink is in Louisiana with his father, Jim Jordan, I'm here. He's the same. Julie Thies is here, and Michelle Robertson. 4 board members, and then coming to the appointed budget committee members.
Okay.
I'm Chris Cahill.
Just
I own
make it
a
easier
local
for you.
trucking company. My wife works within the school district. I have 2 children at North Bay Elementary School. And I'm happy to be here.
Jeff Bridges.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Bridgens, a finance director with the city of North Bend. I also have 2 children in the North Bend School District, both at the high school. And we've also got this conflict of interest that I'd like to just read and get it out of the way. A potential conflict of interest is Oregon Revised Statute 244-02013 requires me as a member of the North Bend School District Budget Committee to declare a potential conflict of interest since I am married to an employee of the North Bend School District. My wife, Jen, works in the business office. This declaration recognizes that the action by this committee could have a financial impact on me and my family by making the statement I'm allowed by law to participate in the discussion and debate, as well as vote on the proposed North Bend School District budget. Should any decisions come up regarding like the business office specific, I would.
So I need to read that as well. Talk the potential conflict of interest. Oregon Revised Statute 244.02013 requires me as a member of North Bend School District Budget Committee to declare a potential conflict of interest since I am married to an employee of the North Bend School District. My wife is the director of the teaching and learning in the district office. This declaration recognizes that the action of this committee could have a financial impact on me and my family. By making this statement, I am allowed by law to participate in the discussion and debate as well as vote on proposed North Bend School District budget.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Why Van Gordon?
Hi, I'm Blythe Van Gordon. I am a project manager at an advertising agency, not a local company. I work remotely for a company out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I have 2 kids. I started 5th grade at the middle school in the picture focus townhouse. Be 1.5 right now, but I'll be there. And then I don't have a conflict of interest, so I don't have to read that.
Bob Dillard.
Bob Dillard, my wife and I had a business for 30 years in North Bend. Son graduated from North Bend High School, and I worked with the city of North Bend for 36 years before I retired.
Tammy Pearson, absent. Jeffrey Lane.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Lane. I'm the CEO of Coquille Valley Hospital. We lived in North Bend for coming up on 8 years now, I think. And we had 1 child, our youngest, who went to school his junior and his senior year in North Bend High School. So yeah, I also have a conflict of interest. So Oregon Revised Statute 244.020 Sub 13 requires me as a member of the North Bend School District Budget Committee to declare a potential conflict of interest. Since I am married to an employee of the North Bend School District. My wife is Tracy, Vice Principal of the high school. This declaration recognizes that the action of the committee could have a financial impact on me and my family by making a statement. I'm allowed by law to participate in the discussion and debate as well as vote on the proposed North Bend School District budget.
Thank you. Rodney Stalker. Rodney Stalker.
He's from the.
Thanks. Okay, so make it we got 5 appointed budget members and 4 of the elected budget members, so we have 9. And who knows how many we need for a quorum? You know, Grace,
8.
right? Okay, so good there. Thank you. All right, agenda item 3, approval of agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? So Nathan made a motion. Julie made a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, we will have a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. So yeah, is that A in favor, any nays? 9-0, I guess. Okay, agenda item 4, elections. 4A, chairperson. So we're gonna have an election for the chair. You will get the gavel and you will carry forward from this point on for this budget meeting and the subsequent ones. So are there any nominations for the chairperson?
Nominate Jim.
Thank you.
I'll nominate Mr. Data.
Okay. Chris, any further nominations? I would like to make a little campaign speech. It is always better, I feel, to have a member of the appointed budget committee member from the community to chair this. Okay, all right, with that, we will have, did you have a campaign speech?
I'll just say it.
Okay, with that, we'll have a vote. Who's gonna vote for Jim? Thank you. You know, loyalties and then, Bob, okay, loyalties and undervalued, trait, I think he voted for, I got 2 votes. Who would like to vote for Chris? Put your hand up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I got 7 for Chris. Chris, you're the chairman.
That's close.
And I would like to thank, I'd like to thank you 2 guys. Chris, you're the chairman, and so now you go ahead and do the elections for the vice chair and secretary. Okay, so.
Right, so now we need to elect a vice chairperson. Do we have any nominees for a vice chair?
I nominate Bob Dillard.
Well, I'm gonna miss the next meeting.
Oh, well, all right. I
Most likely.
withdraw my, I second.
Are there any other nominations? All right, everybody who would like to vote for Jeff for the vice chair, say aye.
Aye.
Right, all 9, any nays? No? All right, Jeff Lang will be the vice chair, and now we'll need to vote for a secretary. Are there any nominations for secretary?
I nominate Dr. Bridget. And.
Are there any other nominees? All right, Jeff Bridges for secretary. Everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
And everybody opposed say nay. Right, carries 9-0. Secretary will be Jeff Bridgens. And on to the next item of the agenda, the 2025-2026 budget message.
Right, that's gonna go my direction. I'll put it over there. It's actually the next one. You have my written budget message, so I just go over a couple of highlights. And one of the things that we're right off of that is that our budget is aligning with our newly adopted strategic plan. Trying to make sure we do this to make our budget align with our goal, our priorities of district. And you can see what the core goals of our strategic plan are. Foundation of greater success, safe, supported, connected, and present. Continuous growth and academic achievement, for success beyond graduation. So just to start off with, always like to know that what we're putting in this document helps us achieve what we're trying to achieve in our school district for our students. Also want to let you know that the budget is built on 11.359 billion in state school funds that is currently on the table for both the governor's budget and the joint co-chair's budget in the legislature. So at this point in time, that is the amount that we believe will be coming to schools. That's what we can we feel like we can bank on. Even with what's happened at the federal level, we're still hearing that this number should stay solid. It's more likely to impact things that are not a part of this 11.4, if you will. For example, if you're tuned into what's happening specifically with education bills, they're talking about raising the special ed cap from 11% to something above that, and then adding more funds to cover that difference. It's things like that we're worried about, not so much this number here. So we're building a budget on what we believe is the most solid number that continues to come out of the OA, OASBO with the Oregon Association of School Business Officials, COSA, Oregon Department of Education, and OSBA, School Board Association. Right? So 11.359 is where we're building the budget. What we also know from this is that we get all of the schools OEE budgets on a 51 or 49 to 51. So in the first year of the biennium, we see 49%. In the second year of the biennium, we see 51%. That's to help offset roll-up costs. Now, the next thing I just want to mention is that one of our biggest challenges is low birth rates. Low birth rates means that we have fewer students coming into kindergarten than we have graduating as seniors. The example of that this last year, we graduated approximately 180 seniors. 101 students signed up at the beginning of the school year to the kindergarten. And so that low birth rate over time is going to significantly impact our enrollment, which means that we have to be extra vigilant about our budgets. We are certainly in a mindset of scarcity, not in a mindset of surplus. And that was a shift that was been 2 years coming. Once the ESSER funds went away at the federal level, we really had to shift our mindset to that of scarcity and not surplus. And so Tim and I and our team are setting forth a budget that is certainly, of course, a balanced budget, but a budget that has its eye on our changes in our enrollment and the economic situation that we have to be in. Okay, and then some things that have essentially had negative impacts on the budget. We see double-digit increases in utility rates that are impacting us. We also know that the state legislature, not in the current session, but the previous session, passed a law that said school employees or classified employees in the summer, even though they know they're coming back, they can apply for unemployment insurance in the summer. And those costs are directly tacked on us. We pay unemployment on a dollar for dollar basis. We don't We don't put money into a pool and then they draw from that pool. So when one of our employees, receives unemployment benefits, whatever they get, gets billed to us directly. So those costs, last year, it was more than we thought it was gonna be. We have a hard time kind of guess what that looks like, budgeting for how many hundreds of $1,000s it's gonna be, in terms of our, pretty much we feel like this summer it's gonna be worse than last summer, because more people know they can do it. Right, so those kinds of costs are gonna grow, I think, over a 3 or 4 year period. And we're not exactly sure where it's going to end up, but we're trying to be cautious and not over budget for that and understand it. So it's a real challenge for us, but we know those costs are gonna continue to increase. And of course, we don't know any kind of particular unfunded mandate that's gonna come out of the current legislative session that we're gonna have to process next year. So unfunded mandates at the school level are things that the state of Oregon through the legislature or through ODE, State Board of Education, require that we do, but they don't give us any funding to do it. And so those are pieces, for example, we just said, it's an unfunded mandate, we're required to pay unemployment insurance, but they didn't give us any extra funds to offset that. They just funded over different funding. Also want you to know that we're being aggressive, we continue to be aggressive about alternate sources of funding. You will see examples of grants and structured funds that we search to try to get those grants so that we can, in many cases, offset the pressure on the general fund and our state school support money. So positions that are funded with grants and funds like that. I do want to say one last thing that's not in here. It hasn't even really been publicly announced, but we found out earlier this week that we are a successful recipient of a seismic retrofit grant that will apply at North Bay. That was the project that was selected. That's a approximately $2.5 million piece, which you have the budget adjustment that's connected to that grant. We just found out this week. We're going to be able to seismically retrofit the gym. And that project, we believe, we think the big part of the project is going to happen in 27, but we're going to put make this happen in this budget. We're going to underspend it for sure in this budget. We'll have it there already appropriated because we have to have it in our appropriation before we start the process. And so the beginning process is we'll include things like architects and some very specific tasks so that by the summer of 27 we're ready to actually do the project itself. So we're excited about that. But that's again an example of what we're trying to do to try to make good things happen for kids and use grant funds and special funds as much as possible so that we can take a little bit of pressure off of our general fund. So with that, my budget message is complete. If you have any questions, you can ask. Otherwise, the back here.
Any questions, Mom? All right, thank you, Vince. I'd like to welcome Rodney Stelka. You did introduction to her. Would you like to introduce yourself now?
Well, Rodney Stelka, good enough. I appreciate that. Sorry.
All right, welcome. On to budget item number 6, the budget presentation open for discussion. Is that right?
No, actually, I'll present right now,
Oh, okay.
and I mean, we could skip ahead if you guys
Yeah,
want.
okay. Well, it said budget decisions.
I'm with you here.
Okay, well, okay.
I ate dinner too, so I'll try to stay awake. I did just open a sparkling water, if anybody heard that open up for the public, sparkling water. So our budget vision, we've aligned with our strategic plan. As most of you are aware, we've gone through a strategic planning process to build a new 5-year strategic plan that aligns our focus and our goals for our district. And that had a super high level of community involvement, staff involvement, and student involvement. So that was one of our priorities when we were building the budget, prioritized foundational readiness, safe and supportive learning environments, continuous academic growth, and preparing students for success beyond graduation, which really are the 4 primary goals of our strategic plan. We also wanted to maintain make sure that we were maintaining high quality education for students, addressing the unique needs of every learner, ensuring that there's transparency throughout the budgeting process, and making reasonable decisions that support financial stability and long-term sustainability, which has been the key, I believe, for everybody trying to create a budget, is that sustainability piece, but it's been particularly a challenge since the end of the ESSER funds, the American Rescue Plan, from COVID, and also with our declining enrollment and increased costs across the board. So one of the things here in regards to the transparency that we wanted to make sure we point out right as we get going is the budget committee received bound budget books. And after those were bound, we did learn of the seismic retrofit grant. That was a grant, WRK Engineering applied for that grant for us. They had done a seismic analysis of our district and also then submitted for that grant, and we received grant funding. So that was just on the 1st, I believe, that we found out. So what was posted early was the budget without that included. And so what you've all received copies of tonight that's not bound is the revised budget with that included. You also have a proposed budget adjustment sheet that shows you the overall change, that 2.499 million. And this was posted on the public website this morning. So it was posted, before the meeting, at the same time you're receiving this, and which meets our budget law requirements. And there's minor changes throughout a couple of the pages where we get into the capital project funds and the 4,000s. You'll see some minor changes there. It adjusted some of the percentages slightly too, like at the front of the budget book, you'll see some pie graphs and some percentages listed. Some of those just changed very slightly. So which is why we just felt it's best to present a whole new book, give a whole new book to you, give you the adjustment sheet, and make sure that that was all posted. So the public could also see that. So that is a grant that we're very excited to receive. Again, our strategic plan goals. Foundational readiness for success, safe, supported, connected, and present. Continuous growth in academic achievement, and equipped for success and beyond. And those are all students are. Budget assumptions. Did I skip ahead? Okay. We did skip ahead. Is it not letting me go back? There we go. Assumptions used to create the proposed budget. So the budget committee receives a proposed budget. We'll present it tonight for you and kind of go over this overview presentation to give you the higher level view. We'll walk through the document to kind of get you familiar with that. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can tonight. And of course, questions will be collected throughout the week, and we'll come back together next week and try to answer all those questions for you and see if we can move forward next week, or if we again need another meeting after that. So as Vince had mentioned, the state school funding is at 11.35 billion for the state. That's for a 2-year biennium. And then the state takes that and splits it up and gives you 49% the first year, 51% the second. So it is supposed to address roll-up costs. However, it's a little short of that usually. This year, of course, we're going into the new biennium. So that's also one of the challenges as you're building the budget is you don't know 100% what you're going to get when you start this process. And so luckily we do feel pretty solid that this number will stick. Sometimes it can come in a little bit higher. We don't anticipate it to come in lower. We're facing continuing declining enrollment. We have a general fund. The support functions have increased, just pretty much across the board. Utilities, insurance coverage, student transportation are some examples of those support coverage, things that have increased. Also, increased labor costs. We just finished negotiations with our certified union, and they will be receiving a 5% cost of living increase next year. And that also applies then to all classified, because in the classified negotiations, they piggyback on that. In year 2 of their contract, they get essentially what certified get. So we're going to see 5% increase in salary costs that also had to be included into this budget. When we're looking at the budget as well, what we're looking at here is essentially status quo staffing wise. So we try to build the budget showing you what it is to maintain current staffing levels. And you'll see a little bit here as we get down the road a little bit in the slides, kind of how that affects us in our long-term planning. So our enrollment numbers right now. So we build the budget with a projected enrollment in mind. Those projections get submitted to the state in December. So we're trying to already start the process very early in the year. So at the time we submitted that, we were projecting about 912 students to start the year next year. EVA is Evergreen. That is the virtual charter school that our district sponsors, and they've projected 950. Evergreen has been projecting higher than their actual enrollment the last couple of years. So we do anticipate this number to be high. Obviously, we're hopeful that they can hit that number, but it typically is high. Back to the North Bend side, you'll see 24-25 in September, our enrollment was 1,955. Now, last year, when this was presented to you, we were projecting an enrollment of 2,001. So the budget for 24-25 was built around 2,001 students. In September, we were already at 1,955. So we were already down a significant chunk because each one of those students is about $10,600 of our budget. So now, as of just the last board meeting, we were down to 1,894. So this is one of those examples of how when you're building your budget, you're kind of looking in a crystal ball, trying to do your best to project it, but it's typically changing just as you're building it. So we know we'll be right now probably lower than 1912, hopefully not too much lower, but we are pretty low right now, just about 1,900. So a big decrease from where we built the current year budget. But we typically show you when we build these trends based on September 30th enrollment to just give you sort of the same point in time, except for 25-26, which of course is the projection. Everything else is a real number as of September 30th. So here you can see our enrollment trend over time. ADM, if you're unaware, stands for average daily membership. Here you see Evergreen Virtual Academy. And you can see the giant spike here that happened during COVID. When schools had to then serve their students virtually. A lot of parents chose to withdraw and enroll their students in the Virtual Academy. Evergreen accepts students around the state. So that's why they saw such a huge increase. And then they've been declining, sort of in this declining pattern ever since. We're now at a point where we should see them stabilize. And they are starting to stabilize too. So for us, 100 students that drop, every 100 students that drop is about 1.1 million. For Evergreen, every 100 students that drop is about $66,000 of revenue to us. So another thing that's a little bit unique about our budget versus other school district budgets is the fact that we host a virtual charter school. Because what happens is the state pays us for their ADM, for their average daily membership, and then we pass through a majority of that to the charter for their operations. So we have a separate agreement with them where we maintain 5 to 6% of that. So that's where we make a revenue stream out of hosting the charter. And then, of course, we are responsible for ensuring that they're in compliance with state laws, federal laws. So a different effect on us, but it is still an effect when they're dropping, because we're building a budget based on their enrollment as well and on this extra revenue. So they show up in purchase services in our budget. So it looks like there's an enormous amount of money going out in purchase services. That's because it is money that flows to us and then flows through us back to the charter school. So again, as we discussed, enrollment directly relates to the state school fund. As our students are going up, we're getting more state school fund dollars. As they're going down, we're leaving less. Those adjustments aren't immediate through the state. They come throughout the year, and then there's reconciliations in May of the current year and then May of the following year. Moving into 25-26, so this current school year, it was about 10,600 per student. Next year, it'll be about 11,094 per student is the amount state school fund equates to. And that is an increase of about $605. Last year, we saw an increase of about $829. So that's another challenge, is that state school fund, it doesn't increase at a consistent level. So it's hard to meet the needs of rising employee costs and COLA requests from our unions, when in fact we don't always know that we're going to see a consistent increase from the state year to year. So overall, the state school fund, including Evergreen, is an increase in funding of almost $800,000. Of that, Evergreen Virtual Academy has an increase of about $574,000, and North Bend's about $223,000. So again, you're seeing a budget that's built on a stable employee workforce here with some declining enrollment and all these costs increasing, yet we're only seeing a state school fund increase that we realize of $223,000. Which you're probably asking yourself, how can you do it? And we will answer that question here shortly. Some of the shortfall contributing factors, the rising costs, inflation impacts goods and services across the board. PERS costs continue to rise. Our compensation for employees and student needs are growing, providing additional services within the schools. Limited revenue. The state school fund dollars fall short of our operating costs. Federal funding is uncertain and could impact future budget years. And we do have fewer students that we're enrolling than we are graduating. So as a significant factor on us. And as Vince mentioned, the low birth rates are a factor, and as are people that are leaving the state. So obviously, when we have opportunities to increase enrollment, it is a good thing. We can't plan now in the budget for like the port project, for example, but that would be an example of a major project that would have a significant impact on our schools and bring in a lot of revenue. So all district funds for 25-26. So again, this is the state school fund and all other funds too. So this is going to include grant funds as well, property taxes, is proposed at $68,632,000. That's the updated amount, including the seismic grant. What was in the initial document posted back on the 28th was 66. So our adopted 24-25 adopted budget was 64.5 million. And so we're seeing an increase of about, with the seismic grant, about 4 million is our increase. And the seismic grant we put in here, just, you'll see it later in the budget, but it's in its own category. It'll sit kind of in the spot where you can just see it outright. It's not mixed in with other things to make it hidden. I think it was 2027, we anticipated actually getting the construction done. Summer of 27. So here's, again, one of the pie charts, for example, on one of the beginning pages of the book that was originally published and bound. Some of these percentages might have changed slightly. But you can get an idea of how much of our budget is built around the general fund and special revenues, debt service, capital projects. The general fund is our primary operating fund for the district. It finances pretty much any day-to-day operations. That can pay for salaries. It's the one we have the most freedom over, I should say. Salaries, supplies, transportation, utilities, building, and all kinds of things. So special revenues is your grants. Proposed budget for the general fund. So we're going to kind of shift focus and look just at the general fund. Again, primary operating source. 25-26 proposed budget of $47,014,073. An increase of approximately 3%. So here again is showing you sort of the general fund expenditures. 57% of that goes by instruction and support services, about 32%, and others 11%. So the function, when you're looking at our budget, there's the fund and function level, and the budget committee is adopting a budget on fund and function. We do get into the object level in the books to break it down even further, but think of function as telling you the purpose of the funds. So in terms of function, is it for instruction, tied directly to instructing children, or is it supporting that process of instructing children? In the general fund by function, you have primarily your instruction, support services, community services, debt service and transfers, and contingencies. So you see a comparison from 24-25 adopted, and then to 25-26 proposed. And we're looking at, again, instruction here. It is including, at this function level, it's including our charter school and the amount we pay them. Our support services like utilities, transportation costs are included here. The transfers, debt service and transfers, you'll see money in here in the budget that's transferred. It's got our unemployment allocations in there. We have capital improvement fund in there. And then there's some other reserves that are planned, things that I discussed last year, and so I'll explain them again here. The transfers, things like textbook reserves. These things have to be planned ahead of time because a textbook adoption is very expensive, and textbooks happen on cycles. So the state requires you to adopt a new textbook every so many years. But if you're adopting in language arts one year, you might see a $600,000-$700,000 cost. But if you haven't planned ahead for that, that becomes a huge burden on your budget that year. Things like the technology replacement cycle. So our computers are on a 1-to-1 basis with students. So we have to plan for the replacement of those. The Chromebooks only have a lifetime of so many years that you can even get them updated through Google. So we have a replacement cycle for those. The field turf is a huge cost. You could be looking, I think, right now, maybe $600,000 is what I'm seeing other districts pay to replace just the turf. That doesn't include the track. That doesn't include other major things that need to be done underneath it if there's any damage. So if you don't plan ahead for those types of costs, you can really see getting yourselves into a bind as a district. So that's what those reserves are. So we plan for them in our budget as transfers, build them into the budget and then transfer them through the year into these reserve funds so that they can be there when we need them in the future. The contingency is also known as our ending fund balance. So the contingency is where we're putting that ending fund balance that, as the board knows, I talk about as, again, something that we have a high priority to protect. It's something that we always want to have in place. It really is what provides us with the financial stability we need as a government entity. The ending fund balance is essentially our financial security. Helps us cover cash flow needs, emergencies, unexpected revenue shortfalls. And that contingency, it ends up being about 9% of the general fund, but it takes into account two different things. And this is per board resolution from 2011 and board policy, which we added recently within the last couple of years. And that requires 2% of general fund revenue is part of that contingency, and then 5% of all revenue. So that's where we say the word 7%, but it really comes out to be a little bit more when you house it all in your general fund, because it's a smaller chunk of money, but it's counting for a reserve contingency of all the funds. That makes sense. So when we propose the budget, what we've done is we've built it to ensure that 2% and 5% are there at the end of 25-26 to meet board requirements and to be financially responsible. Moving into the object level. So again, think function, and then object is more the type of thing we're actually like getting. What are we getting? Are we paying this into salaries? Is it, supplies and materials like books, pencils, things like that? So you can look at it from function, the service, and then what is it that they're providing? So it's kind of drilling down a little bit deeper. So we're seeing in salaries increasing by about 400,000. Benefits increasing. Purchase services down a little bit. Purchase services is again where you're going to see Evergreen, Virtual Academy. Supplies, capital outlay, debt service. So on the far right, you see if those are increasing or decreasing. And then as we delve into the budget book itself, you'll actually see where they are increasing and decreasing. And that's where we want to make sure we're answering your questions as we get into that budget book. So again, you saw the transfers on. You'll see them, here in function. You also then again see them happening over here in object too. So we have a little increase in transfers as well. And our contingency once again. As of July 1st, 2025, our estimated ending fund balance, which will be the beginning fund balance in this budget for 2025-26, is estimated to be $8 million. In June 2026, it's estimated to be 4.2. So that's where back here I was showing you that contingency is the ending fund balance. 4.2 is the 2% and the 5% per board policy that we need. When we built the budget, like I said, we were building it, showing you all staffing at current levels, but all those costs increasing. This is the page here that shows you the outcome, where we're ending the year with about $8 million, almost $4 million over our requirement. We're now going to have to budget to have the appropriation ability to use it, which will drive us right back down to the minimum requirement for board policy. So in other words, we'll be using 3.7 million of our reserves in order to get through this 25-26 budget if we maintain the staffing levels where they're at. Estimated ending fund balance of the general fund, 9%. Here you can see sort of the history of those reserves. Again, when you're back here in the past, you see these are actuals after they've been audited. 24-25, we're looking at the estimate of about 8 million. And then next year estimating 4.2 million. Again, a big drop there. That is the effect of all those rising costs, increased labor costs, if we maintain current staffing levels with our declining enrollment. So I'm shifting from the general fund, and you might be thinking of some questions. We'll get into the book and the format of that after I go through some of these other funds. And then again, like I said, we'll have a chance for you to formulate your questions throughout the week, send them in, and we'll answer them for sure next week, and we'll try to answer what we can tonight. So we'll highlight some of our other grants. So this is getting more into our special revenues, and some of our big grants. We have Stronger Connections, Student Investment Account, High School Success, Preschool Promise, Early Literacy, and then now the Oregon Seismic Grant. The Stronger Connections Grant is a 2-year competitive grant. We were one of a handful of districts around the state to be selected for this. And what we did with all of our grants is we aligned them to our strategic plan goals. So the board members that are present recall that we recently reviewed the integrated guidance grants with you, and the integrated guidance grants is a combination of your student investment account, high school success, and early literacy. So what we did, and I showed you at that board meeting, is we aligned it to our strategic plan goals. So we've done that with all of our other grants too, to make sure that we're also aligning our expenditures to the goals of the district. So here we're supporting strategic plan goals 1 and 2. All of you were provided a copy, a 4-pager of the strategic plan tonight, so you can refer back to that and review that for alignment at your leisure. Some of the things that Stronger Connections Grant is supporting is a second school safety resource officer, and that city just onboarded that officer, got him going here recently, so we're very excited about that. Suicide and bully prevention training, additional counseling through Coos Health and Wellness. We have yet to been able to acquire the additional counseling. They have a hard time finding counselors. Security supplies, community engagement opportunities, and character development, collaborative problem-solving training, and restorative practices were all things that we outlined in the grant as goals of the district. And so essentially what's happened, we're going to see some of it this year, but there'll be more opportunities next year. So because we didn't have the school resource officer earlier in the year, that was the benefit of that, is that we had those extra funds to spend. And same with not being able to find the counseling services, is we had additional funds. So we've been able to really ramp up our community engagement efforts. So May 17th, you'll see the first event on Saturday, just coming up next weekend, where we've partnered with Wayfinder, who's also a character development program, and who also integrates collaborative problem solving and restorative practices into their programs, into a Saturday fun family event next week. And we'll have 3 more of those next year as well, which we're excited to offer. So that's really what the Stronger Connections Grant is supporting. Security supplies are things like card lock readers, just continuing to expand that. We've got them on a lot of our main buildings. We don't have them across all of our buildings yet. Also fencing, we've been making, and you'll see those investments in student investment account as well. We've just been slowly kind of picking away at the campuses, trying to make sure that there's fencing and securing all the campuses, all the way around. One of our walkthroughs with the police department a couple years ago had suggested primary areas to focus on fencing and eventually getting to the high school to a point where there's really only like 2 access points, throughout the day, 2 entry and exit points. And so we're getting a lot closer to that. In our student investment account, our focus is on, these are the allowable investments, class sizes, well-rounded education, instructional time, and health and safety. So we've aligned that to all of the strategic plan goals, 1, 2, 3, and 4. It supports about 19 FTE, full-time employees, behavior staff, so certified and administrative, additional staff. So these are things we wouldn't normally be able to fund through just the general fund if it wasn't for the SIA grant. Social emotional learning staff in all of our buildings. We have most of them are in elementary. There's a pretty good chunk in middle school. And then outdoor education at the middle school, teacher mentoring stipends. We have a robust teacher mentoring program in place now, and instructional literacy specialists, early learning opportunities. So things like after school and summer school opportunities are funded as well. And middle school, high school, licensed school therapists through Who's Health and Wellness. These are positions we actually do have already. We were hoping to expand through the Stronger Connections, but these are ones that we do have right now. Social emotional learning, professional development, safety and security, again, additional upgrades to fencing, cameras, card locks, things like that. A small amount of money for textbook adoption. It's very small, not enough to cover textbooks, but sometimes after you do an adoption, you need to get some supplementary materials or things that align to it. So this provides us with an additional source of funding for that. Or maybe some intervention materials, for like our reading programs. Learning connectivity, so tech supplies, and then 5% administrative costs. All of the grants come with high level of reporting requirements. And so you're always allowed to assign some administrative costs to the grants as well to help you meet those requirements. And those grants help support our business team. Support strategic planning goals 2, 3, and 4 through the High School Success Grant, another grant that's been lumped in with integrated guidance, but High School Success is primarily focused on graduation efforts. So here we have our graduation and attendance coaches at the high school, secondary level, funded, Aspire coordinator, career coordinator. CTE teachers are funded through their community college expanded options and professional development. Preschool Promise Grant, supporting goals 1, 2, and 3. So we, this year, added 2 preschool classrooms. So again, as you're going through the budget, you'll see that some things increased and they're different even than where they were when they were adopted, because we did some adjustments throughout the year because we received some additional grant funding. So the Preschool Promise was one of them. So we added 2 preschool classrooms, preschool coordinators / teachers, educational assistants, material supplies, and transportation. So if you're out there by North Bay and you go into that kind of side parking lot area, you can see what's going on over there. That's where the Biddy Bulldogs program is. And it's coming along quite nicely. You'll see some playground equipment going in there soon. And some storage. They've got some matting going in. There's fencing around it. Really great program going on out there. It's led primarily through Dana Cahill. And so really coming along nicely. Supports early literacy supports. The early literacy grant supports our strategic planning goals 1, 2, and 3. And that is also supporting early literacy specialists, professional development, and supplies and materials. And we've added the Oregon Seismic Grant. And that is in Fund 403 capital projects. Again, that stands out significantly as its own thing here. And we're just awarded that on 5.2. I said 5.1 earlier, it's 5.2, sorry. So our roles here, really are to, look at the proposed budget. The budget committee, reviews. And you can ask questions, we can make suggestions, alter as needed at the fund and function level. And, really then approve the appropriations at the fund and function level. And the funds are the general fund, the special revenue fund, debt service fund, and capital projects. And with each one of those at the function level, you'll see instruction, support services, enterprise, capital debt contingency, and the amounts reserved. And I will here pull you to your budget book on page 125. You can see that in the resolution format. So again, 125, you see underneath the resolution there, the titles of the different funds: general fund, special revenue, debt service, and capital projects. And within those, your functions, 1,000 instruction, 2,000 support services, 3,000 enterprise community services, 5,000 are debt services and transfers, and then contingency. Facilities acquisition would be 4,000s, and then interfund transfers, 5,200s, and then contingencies and 6,000s and 7,000s reserved. We do have an email specifically for questions from the budget committee or the community. Of course, the budget committee can also communicate directly with us, and we'll do what we can to have those questions answered. Questions must be submitted by May 14th in order to be answered in time for the next budget committee meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to, are we doing okay here, or do we need a break? Everybody okay?
It's fascinating.
It is fascinating, isn't it? In your proposed budget book, kind of just to highlight the organization of that, you have your table of contents here, right up front. And you'll kind of get into some narrative sections at first. Budget development process, budget committee members, the calendar, and then different narratives from different departments, sort of just updating you on some different things happening in the different areas of the schools. Student enrollment numbers and trends, some budget assumptions, and then we get into the financial sections. As we're going into the document, I'm going to jump ahead to the financial section. I'm sure you do have some questions in the narratives. If we have time tonight, we'll be happy to attempt to answer those. But in the page 41, you can really get to the summary of all funds. And again, don't even bother looking at the bound copy. Then please use the new copy we have here tonight, provided to you. So everything just presented again aligns here with a total of all revenue sources at $68,632,056. And then you'll see that our expenditures, whether they're classified by function or object, also balance out. And that does include the seismic grant that was added. On the next page, page 42. We have our adopted budgets from 22 through our proposed budget of 25-26. We can kind of see a comparison there of what's been going on. And then your final line is showing you the percentage change, which is often interesting to look at. So at the bottom of that page 42, you can see like the 100% increase on line 403, which is because we added the seismic grant, which did not exist in any of the other adopted budgets. Page 43. On the bottom on page 43 for 24-25 in green. You'll see that if you go back to the amount from last year, this changed here because we also added, like I said, the preschool promise grant that came in 2 chunks, and then SIA had also given us an additional amount of money, which we then brought to the board in order to receive appropriation authority to spend that. So we were able to increase our budget. So that's why this number might be different if you would try to go back to the book you had last year. Page 44 is showing you an FTE breakdown, the full-time equivalent of staff breakdown by the funds. And so if you were looking at well, federal and state programs, you see 29.36. One question that's been coming up a lot recently is if federal funding's cut, how does that affect you? And it would be your 200 and your 250s. So really you're looking at that 29.36 and the 13.56 for our staff here in district. Other sources have put out numbers that might include evergreen, or they might include substitutes as well, based on the number of W-2 we discovered. We just dug into this. The number of W-2s that were sent out by the district. They took in one thing that the state released, it went out showing that we had like 710 employees, and 9% of that was our federal funding, so that we had about 64 employees that were federal funded, but that was not the case. This is the number that's federally funded. When you get into page 46, you pie graph kind of breaking it down for you. 47 is showing you trends based on fund, object, function on 48. 49, you get into the general fund function history. So here's where you can see on starting on page 49, previous year actuals, and what that means is it's already been audited. So it is an actual number that we know we actually spent the money, and the auditors agree with that, and it's been submitted to the state as actuals. And then 24-25, we're operating right now off of an adopted budget. And then you're seeing what we are proposing for next school year. So when you see the percentages, the increase or decrease here, it's not a percentage of dollar amount, but that percentage increase is based on what was adopted. And then what we're proposing, it might not be big. The change might be because of actuals that have changed throughout the year in spending, not really on not on the adopted part or on projected increases or decreases. There's various reasons for that, but we can explain all that when you have those questions. So if we get into like middle school programs, you know, right here off of instruction, 1121 middle school programs, you'll see that went down by 241,000. But that doesn't mean that they lost the services by that much. We had shifted funding to grant. So this is the result of moving money from general fund to special revenues, or vice versa, is how we can answer a lot of these questions. Again, charter, that would be the same case for the high school programs, actually increasing by 340,000. Charter school, that decrease would be due to enrollment. English as a second language, you see an increase of 46,000. that there was a person that was funded out of a grant. House Bill 3499 was a grant to focus on English language learners, and there was a position funded there, and that grant funding is ending. So now we don't want to lose that service of that person for those students. So we're moving that cost back into the general fund. So that's why you're seeing an increase of 46,000 there, even though it's a small group of students, it was previously grant funded. So this is where I'll really, like I said, I encourage you to kind of go through and pick through it, identify places where you have questions, so that way we can make sure that we answer those questions. A lot of the increases are really payroll increases based on what we had budgeted, where we are now, what we're thinking they're going to go up to with the 5% as well. Principal services went up. For example, down here in the bottom, we added principal to Hillcrest this year. Shifted some of that funding around through different grants, and I want to make sure the money's in the general fund. So the next page, 50, you see payroll services went up by that's line 2524 by 140,000. Those are increases due to unemployment cost increases that are anticipated. Since we now have to cover unemployment for classified employees, last summer was really the first year that they could have claimed unemployment over the summer. So we kind of ballparked where we thought they'd be. And now that more people know about it, more can apply. So we want to make sure more money set aside to cover those costs that are increasing. It also is covering your paid family medical leave, insurance and fees in there. And then just increases in those payroll related costs. Down a little bit further, a new expense here, 3360. So in support services, 3360 has neglected student, $50,000. We had a homeless liaison, a McKinney-Vento person that we've contracted with Coos Bay for. And we were contracting with them. That's Melinda Torres, who runs the ARC project over in Coos Bay. And it's a fantastic program. She's an amazing resource for the families navigating homelessness. And we had been covering that through money from the American Rescue Plan that was specifically for McKinney-Vento homeless students. And so we also had an open position at the time. So when our previous homeless liaison left, we had a little bit of money in the general fund, and then we had this grant, and then basically we moved it all into grants. So that's why you don't see any actuals along that line. But now moving into next year, we don't have those grant funds anymore. So we just made some moves to move some money aside so that we could continue that partnership with Coos Bay and continue to provide the services to our families and our students that are really in need. So that's why you see that there. And again, I was just, I believe, on the phone maybe yesterday with Coos Bay trying to work this out. So, but we had to build the budget on a number. It'll probably be a little bit less as what we'll actually spend, but we wanted to make sure we had it covered there. So that's why something like that there appeared. Going down to the next pages, 52, 53, then you're switching over to the object level. So again, kind of driving down a little bit deeper. Things on the object level that increased, our PERS contributions are increasing because of payroll increases. And so really those get lumped together when you're looking at those 211, 212, 13, 16, you want to just kind of lump those together as a whole. Same thing happens in medical. So like in the 240s, so going 240, 241, all the way through 249 on the next page. A lot of ballpark, there's a lot of guessing going on, looking forward, because you don't know what all the different plans employees will pick. When you're putting this together, so we try to stay as close together as we can, but sometimes things do shift. Like on page 53, 241, you'll see medical insurance has a decrease at 252,000. But then on page 54, you can jump straight to the 246 and 247, where we have increases of 79 and 149. So these things kind of, they overall offset, but in the end, in that whole 200 category, you are seeing an increase of $758,000. So again, we can get into more specific questions on those next time. And I don't want to just guess here on every single line item. You might have a question, so I'll just kind of leave those pages at that. Starting on page 59, you get into the general fund requirements, and you'll again, you're breaking this down on another level. And as you continue to move forward, you can really see kind of where the different money in each function is going. And it's possible that you've had a chance to look through this and may already have some questions lined up. But I want to just make sure we continue to go through this. When we get down to page. We can, yeah, I mean, I was just gonna, when we just go through the document, you'll see a bunch of supporting information in the back. It'll talk about our, some examples of the, what was posted in the newspaper, proposed budget, motion to approve. You'll see the printouts from the state school fund that show the breakdown of the 49-51 split and how the money in the state school fund distribution formula works. And the resolution, you'll see our district coaches, our vehicle fleet, and the chart of accounts. So, yes, ready.
So, charter school, it looks like for this coming year, it's 10.7 million. That's the entire budget for the right here.
Yeah, what page are you on?
Page 55. 360 charter school.
Yep, that's that. If they are at 950 students, that is the amount of money that they would get.
And we're making like 66,000 per 100 kids.
Yeah.
Do the numbers, that's about 627,000 is what we make.
Right.
By administering, okay.
Yeah.
Is that, and then we're providing services also, is that right, or is that what we're actually kind of?
Administrative oversight, I would call it. They have their own team of administrators, they have their own school board. We want to, with any grants that we receive that flow through us, it's a similar type of thing. They would work with our administrators to make sure that they're in compliance with the rules of those grants. They work with our finance team because most of our grants are reimbursable. They're reimbursement grants. So we spend the money up front and we have to show them proof, the state proof, and then we can draw down the money. So Evergreen, they operate the same way. We expect that, they'll pay the money. They have to show us the proof that they spent it according to the correct purposes, and then we'll submit for the reimbursement, and then they can have it. So we're not paying them out before we know if they spent it, if they spent it correctly. And then things like special education, we're responsible for ensuring that they're all following all federal laws. So our special education director works closely with their special education director. And they have touch points, and in our agreement, they've agreed to bring some of the more complex cases to us just so we can, be there and provide some guidance. Technology works with them quite a bit. Their students are housed in our student information system. Again, for state reporting purposes and for receiving funds from the state school fund. That requires a lot of work, coordination between tech. Evergreen, and then, anything contract related, HR related, staffing related, that could be Vince or I talking to.
Is it, paying for itself?
It is a revenue, yes, it is. The biggest challenge that we were having was the fact that, and they didn't know what was gonna happen either, but we kind of knew, but it wasn't for certain, but it was the fact that after COVID, that they declined so fast. Because we were building budgets based on what they were telling us they were gonna have, and then they didn't have it. So then that was affecting our operations, operating expenses as well. So as they're leveling out, it's getting a little bit easier to plan for that.
We also, last fiscal year especially, battled with them a little bit because they, set their estimates on a number, and then their actual enrollment was quite a bit lower. And they wanted us to pay them on their estimate, not on their actual. And Tim and I really talked about that, and we paid them on what their actual enrollment was, because we wanted to protect ourselves. And the way that ODE resolves their resolution process is at the end of the fiscal year, they true up all of those accounts the following May. And so that reconciliation, if we would have kept paying them, and then ODE said, oh, we overpaid, then we would be asking them to pay us back so that we could pay back ODE, and they wouldn't necessarily have it to pay based on us. Well, there was at least a scenario existed in our mind where they wouldn't be solvent enough to be able to pay back, in essence, $2 million on the spot that we're gonna have to turn around and pay to ODE. And then if they couldn't, ODE was gonna take it from us anyway. And so we would have been in a real pinch. And so I just want you to hear that as well, is that we monitor their enrollment, that it needs to be well sorted or careful with how we make payouts to them so that they can protect the district in that process.
We almost felt like an escrow account.
We do, and in our agreement, we keep one payment. Throughout the year, so when the state school fund starts over the summer, we get a double payment from the state to start the year off, but they only get one. And then we hold that throughout the year, and then they get that in the reconciliation at the end of the year, so that way we can avoid trying to get into that process. But previously, we've been holding two for the previous agreement, so based on some of the declining enrollment situations going on, and we were at the end of House Bill 743, which had to do with the charter school enrollment and how they were paid. We weren't quite sure how that was all going to sort out at the state school fund level. So yeah, having the ability, which our agreement allows, to pay them on their actuals helps protect us when we need to. It's nice to be able to pay them on their estimate, but if we notice a steep drop in enrollment, we can then shift to actuals so that we don't get ourselves in trouble.
Thank you for being wise with that. That's appreciated.
You betcha.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, two questions. One, not completely meaningful, but do we track our decline in enrollment to see who goes to Evergreen and what percentage of them go to Evergreen? And that way, at least we're getting something rather than a total loss. I see you shaking your head, yes.
We've been making a focused effort on tracking students leaving the district. Several years ago, there was a perception that most of our kids were leaving the district and going to Winter Lakes, for example. And so we didn't have anything to support that. It was something that was talked about. So we really started to track that to see if that was true. And there's not a greater percentage of kids going there than anywhere else. Kids are leaving the district, are moving. Some kids are going to Evergreen. A lot of kids are homeschooled. And so we do track that, yeah.
Secondly, more equipment and something that you just brought up, holding the funds for Evergreen. Is that something that the district floats? I know my, like a lot of companies do float that and try, obviously, invest it, whether it's bonds and try to make that 3-5%. Is that something that the school district does or has thought about?
Yes, and that's a great question. As a school district, we're part of a local government investment pool, LGIP account. So our state school fund dollars, we keep them in this LGIP account so we can receive interest on those dollars. So that extra money that we're holding for Evergreen is in that account.
But we should also probably say that, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we were looking at that other issue we had with our ESD and service credits, we took a look at how many of our students were currently enrolled in Evergreen. And I believe it was in 60 something. Which means that if their student enrollment is somewhere in the 900 range, that would mean that about 840 of the students they have enrolled are outside of our district. So all the funds that are coming from that are coming from other parts of the state. It's so I don't want anyone to have the impression that only North Bend students are going to Evergreen. Evergreen students, a charter school is only bound by the line of the state. Okay, they can't pull from other states, but they can pull from anywhere in Oregon. And so, almost, certainly 8/9, 88% of what they have is coming from somewhere else in the state, at least 80, maybe 90%. So it's not, when we see that as kind of profit, we are really, we're coming out ahead. So that's why it kind of still works for us, even though we have some of our students that are ahead.
Great question.
So there was a League of Women Voters forum here, and I'm gonna say 2 of the maybe 10 questions were around the potential loss of federal funding for our title programs. I don't want to go down a rabbit trail or a rabbit hole, but just at a high level in a minute or two, do we have any insight on that? And what might we do if that happens?
Side, I know that the president has submitted what he's entitled his skinny budget. I just read an article from the OSDA, which, by the way, for those of you who don't know the acronym, that's the Coalition of Oregon School Administrators. That's the organization that administrators belong to. And it says that the budget as presented includes funding for Title I. So we're expecting that Title I funding would pretty much stay static. There's certainly not a conversation about cutting off those funds. We are also seeing funds for IDEA, that's the Individual with Disabilities Education Act. Not necessarily building those as much as maintaining them. So those are 2 significant areas that were based on the fact that the administration has put that in his budget. We don't foresee that they'll be pulling the plug on those programs. There are some other programs that they are, but they will have less of an impact on what's happening in the state of Oregon and specifically with this budget. So that's kind of a high level. And anything you want to kind of add to that?
Did that answer your question?
I'm good with that. I don't know what percentage Title I would be of that, but is it the majority perhaps, or a big percentage of?
And Tim did show a page, it kind of listed, I don't know what we had. 29 staff. Yeah. So that's about it. And hypothetically, if the federal government cuts off funding to something like that, we have individuals, most of our individuals, in Title I, for example, are educational assistants who are working in small groups with students. So if they cut that, then it's like you have to, potentially have to lay off those people and have those students just stay in their classrooms. It would be devastating. It's providing direct services to kids who are having a hard time learning how to read and do math. So that would make it more difficult for us to achieve academic goals. But from a monetary standpoint, you'll see those dollars appear in your fund 200s. And so whatever gets funded in that area, if we chose not to back them, then we would, we would take a direct hit. Bruce Martin has essentially tried to have a, I don't know what's called, set aside, but he believes that we've underspent enough of it so that we would have about a year's worth of ability to operate the program. And so he's built a buffer that we could probably, would have benefit us quite a bit, unless the federal government just literally turned off the sky. If they just block the funds, we would be stuck. But as long as we can still submit our we can bill the state, and the state then goes and requests the funds from the federal government. As long as that window is still open, then it will still function for a period of time. But I feel pretty confident based on the president's budget, the Title I and IDEA will continue.
IDEA and Title I are on, you'll find those on page 74. IDEA has to do with students with disabilities, so that's a big part of our special education funding. That would be a significant loss to those programs if we didn't receive that. Title I, on page 74, it was R4501, and that's kind of just been the pattern it's been in for many years, but it really should be 4503. That's just Title I, and this is following what's called the PBAM. It's the Oregon's school budgeting manual that outlines all the codes for these. And so what you're seeing is us recognizing that and shifting it to the appropriate line 4503, which is why there wasn't a previous line there. So after a few years, that'll drop off 4501. But for 22, 23, 23, 24, you can see about what we spent in Title I. We adopt a budget that includes what Vince was just explaining, which is our carryover. So if we don't spend the whole grant, Title I is one that they're allowing us, to roll that into the next school year. Then you haven't until a certain point of the year to spend that. So all your upstart costs and your fees, like through all your employee payroll through like September, you could use that carryover for. So you're always having this extra carryover. We were able to do that with the integrated guidance grants too, but they are now functioning on a biennium. So when you hit the end of the biennium, you actually have to spend down completely by June 30th, which is a little bit of an unfortunate thing. It was really nice to be able to have that carryover year to year.
I'm good on it. Thank you.
And then there's food service too. Also, there's also Title III, which is your English language learner program, and then there's some Title IV funds, which is a small amount of money. Title I is the biggest part of it.
How much money do we get for the corporate activity tax that is beneficial to us? Versus what it used to be before we got the corporate activity tax? What was the increase in benefit that we received as districts or state or anywhere, specifically us? Did we notice anything at all?
Yes, the student investment account grant.
Oh, that's
So
right.
in those special revenues, those pages on
We
student,
still have that?
Yeah.
And it never goes away?
it's not going away.
Okay, and that created, and how much money is in this, specifically in that, from that corporate activity tax? Is that a dumb question?
No, it's not at all. So on the last board meeting, when we got dug into the integrated guidance, and I had that big spreadsheet
Right,
that
I'm sorry.
Anna had put together for us, that one had the exact dollar amounts for a student investment account, and so, we can get that to you again if you like, yeah, oh, look at this, there it is.
Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
you did that. And it's specifically the SIA, right?
SIA is funded through the corporate activity tax,
We never had that before.
so we're receiving 2.6 million next year. From that,
Yes, prior to the passage of this Student Success Act, which authorized them to create student investment account, those monies just simply did not come.
here they're mixed in,
So what I just wanted
they're
to
mixed in
try
on
to
both
get at
pages.
is did our budget that we got from the state go down in lieu of that?
No,
That was additional funding above our state school support, our regular state school support.
yeah, that's a great question.
And then did the, as far back as you can recall, the ADN, has that gone up per student or is it just maintained?
The amount of money per student. There is a,
That's at 605 versus
That-
829.
yeah, here we talked about it in the dollar change per student, so here it was $605 increase from last year. The year before was an increase of like 860. What we did actually, and we went over this with our union negotiations, we showed them a graph that shows it doesn't, it fluctuates. In some years, there's no change percentage wise, you know, and so it does, it's just inconsistent.
But for
But it's
those of us
typically
who've been
going.
around long enough to see this formula in action, like even from what I was teaching, there was a point where we got $5,500 per kid,
Right,
and now it's $10,600.
that's why I was trying to figure out, like, wait a minute.
So over
is
the
there-
course of time, that has been adjusted upwards. And it doesn't match inflation by any stretch. It doesn't.
And that was my
match
next
growth
question,
by
it's not
any stretch,
sustainable.
But it does change.
Helping pay the teachers with that.
No, and that's definitely something we talk about. The state doesn't fund us on inflation. At all, not even close. And there's also some reports put together on the quality education model. So if you look up the QEM. It has a funding level that they're saying schools should be funded at, and we're not close to that.
Especially out within, make it pay their unemployment.
Mhm.
And there's. We have a very labor-friendly governor and legislature. One of the bills that's out there this year that we're happy won't impact us because we just signed an agreement, but they're talking about being able, striking workers being able to get unemployment,
Yeah,
okay?
right.
So it's something that COSA, OSBA are lobbying against, but again, we have a very labor-friendly legislature, and so some of those kinds of things could continue to roll forward.
Is there something we can do to deter that?
Something that say you gotta do, but they don't give us any extra money to back up.
Can you change Joe's to contract employees?
No, because, and I say that because that situation is connected to the fact that under bowling and the Bureau of Labor and Industry Law, those employees aren't exempt. And so the striking piece, well, striking workers, actually, it would be any striking in any industry. But like, for example, the situation with the returning, being able to take unemployment insurance during the summer for a classified employee, it's only for classified, it's not for certified. So, it just depends on.
Is it
Is it
cheaper
trying
than
to use
employing
the law?
them or giving them something else that they could do so that they're So it'll deter them from filing for unemployment?
School districts, all over the state, that all of those kind of conversations,
Yeah.
and there are times in which that answer is yes, and there are times in which that answer is no. I mean, the absurdity of some of the things, anybody who knows about or has actually had utilized unemployment insurance knows that you have to try to get a job, and if you are offered a job, you know, you take it, and if you don't, then
Because our
you
school
could lose
district
your.
employees.
Well, part of the nuances of this law is we could actually offer them 6 weeks of like an educational assistant. We can say, hey, we have a summer program.
Right.
Why do you get 6 weeks? You're in. And you can say, I don't want to,
And that's turning.
and take unemployment and still get it. That is disqualified. So
Wait,
there's some technical nuances to this that are absurd inconsistencies and double standards. And yeah, it is what it is. And so you're doing the best you can. to work it.
Good job, guys. Congratulations. You get a gold star.
I can't tell you how many hours of conversation I've heard from superintendents all across the state in meetings that I'm a part of, in which they talked about different ways of working with and
I'm
around
so sorry.
and how to manage that employment piece all by itself.
I feel quite
It's the
useless
main
sitting
example
here
that's
going,
being used by code our lobbyists. Try to get people to not pass bills that are unfunded mandates.
Mhm.
That is probably the poster child for unfunded mandate. You're making us pay all that money, it's not geared to students. It doesn't impact instruction in the least, and yet you're not giving us money to that bill.
So I've got a question about staffing. At one point, you said maintain staffing levels, and then later on you said if we maintain current staffing levels, so it's decided. When does that decision get made? And
Well, we have to look at our current attrition rates and what is happening with our staff. And what is our enrollment at each of those levels? And if we don't make adjustments, will it be sustainable? This is the time of year where, you know, we have to build a budget. And so we want to build it with our current staffing levels and with all those roll-up costs. Because if we need to maintain all that staff because of enrollment, we want to make sure we can. But if enrollment stays at the current level, what we're going to see is the use of that sort of reserve funds, and seeing it decline over $3 million in 1 year means that it is not sustainable. So as we sort of hone in on adopting this budget, then the next decision becomes, let's look at our current attrition and see if that's matching our declining enrollment, and then do some projections using our Forecast 5 software to see if we can offset that decline by the attrition and see if that will bring that reserve back up. And if it doesn't, then we're going to make some adjustments. Yeah.
when do you find out about the retirements and the attrition date?
We're at this time of year, they start rolling in. So we found out about quite a few. And so some of them that, again, the budget's built with those positions in, but we know we don't need that many positions. So you'll see a lot of these changes right now are already unfolding at the elementary level, where we have teachers retiring or leaving, you know, to move to other areas, or maybe their Coast Guard families. So then we have to look at the enrollment, you know, what with that X number of people leaving, what happens to the ratio of students to teachers? And is that a realistic ratio to still provide a high quality instruction? And then make the decision to hire.
So can I just ask a follow-up question? So in the budget book, it says that there were no planned reductions in FTEs, right? And I see an FTE graph where you've got essentially no reductions. You have some reductions in elementary, some additions across senior high and things like that. You're sort of moving from one to other. But the way that you set your budget is you basically set an assumption, which is the highest level. What I hear you saying is that as the year goes on, you expect that you will be making adjustments and you will have FTE reductions. Is that what?
Well, there's, I mean, in the reduction versus like reduction as in like a reduction in force versus just natural attrition and not replacing. Kind of,
I don't
Yeah.
care about how you get.
Yeah.
there. My question
Well,
is
there-
simply, you're at 200 FTEs or 279,
mhm,
280 in your budget.
mhm.
But it could be when the school year starts, 250.
Probably not 250,
Well,
but I think. it's
something
safe
lower
to
than
say
280.
that
Mhm.
We're presenting a budget that we fully expect to underspend. So if we're talking about a general fund of $47 million, we're hoping to underspend that by a few $1,000,000. We came into the current school year hoping to underspend this year by a couple of million, and we underspend it by over 3. And I think that's just one of those situations where if as we understand more about our projected numbers, considering it's Oregon's kind of nutty in the way they want school districts to build their budget. We're making projections on enrollment in December, and so that we can put this document together by May. And then we really figure out what's going on, sometime in the spring and even in the summer, as we start adjusting our staffing levels and looking at how many kids we have and try to put all those pieces together. So it's just when you're taking your best guess about all kinds of different aspects, but.
Well, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm trying to remember last year, I believe there was a plan to take almost $4 million out of reserves so that it would draw that reserve balance down, I think, to 4 million. You're starting
And
this
we were-
budget at 8, which
Mhm.
tells me you underspent, which again, you have to have reserves.
Which is what we do, and one of the ways we're gonna understand is by looking at attrition, real attrition. So at different points in the spring or throughout the year, you find out teachers are not planning to come back or other staff members. And then we, of course, evaluate whether or not the replacement of that position is necessary and how we're gonna do that. And so, we know if it's gonna be sustainable over the next 2 years, that we're gonna have less FTE than we have right now.
Do you guys have a sense for, again, this is just from memory, but I think there were 90 kids that were projected to come into kindergarten. Do you have a sense for how many kids that reside within the district are choosing other educational venues, right? So there's the Lakeview Christian School or the Lighthouse School, but kids that are going away, because that's just until 6th grade, right? So they come back
Well,
for 7, not all.
it really depends on the program. We certainly see a bigger impact with the younger grades because we have private school options, and we have other options available. And so, in terms of, we don't necessarily go knock on their door and say, how many of your kindergartners are living in North Bend and how many of them live in Coos Bay? But we do know that there are private schools that have served kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade kids and up through K-8 for a long time. One of those actually closed this year. And so, in fact, Kristen,
Yeah, our kids went to
your kids went to, yeah. And so those kind of scenarios happen. We also know that right now there's a successful private school out on the river that has a good number of students. Both, let's say both, I mean, all the schools locally have, all the districts have been impacted by, that to the tune of $10,600 per kid. So as that program continues, if they're successful, then it continues to have an impact. So, but we haven't, like I said, we don't know exactly how many of our kids go that way.
Do you have a rough guess, though? I would imagine that's what your Betty Bulldog program is for, right? And try and bring people back in to the district.
Part of it
or
is,
to
and the other part of the Bitty Bulldog program is so that our kindergartners have more readiness when they walk through the door on the first day of kindergarten. Because there is, I think it's very safe to say that 10 years ago versus 20 years ago versus 2025, the level of readiness, a 5-year-old walking through the door as a kindergartner has diminished greatly. And that the gap between the number of students who are ready to go to kindergarten and the number of students who are not ready to go to kindergarten, not only is the top section decreasing in percentage, but the gap between where these kids are and where these kids are is also widening. I mean, I hate to tell stories, but my wife's an EA and like she was working with a kid the other day who didn't know how to turn the video on. And I really, I mean, I've been around the same a long time, and that's right. Right, to have kids who just didn't, now, be sure it's can probably do all kinds of apps on the phone. But they couldn't turn the video on, right, so so that part of the Bitty Bulldog piece was to develop a school readiness for preschoolers, and we think we're hopeful it's gonna have it. But, and to give, like you say, I mean, if we can attract kids into the area, we'll have to expand our program. So we're honestly hoping that inner site gets developed, we've already possibly developed. Preschool program in that facility. That we would, grant schools that would be offered. And in front of them, make that be more robust. The reality is, all across the state, the kindergarten numbers are being impacted by low birth rates. We have one school district in our region that is not experiencing that, that's Dan. Everybody else in our region is experiencing low kindergarten. So you get an idea, 180 seniors approximately graduated last year. We started the year with 101 kindergarten students, and we were down to 90. Those are big numbers. Little numbers that are big numbers.
So, and then a couple thoughts as Vince's been talking to, I'll kind of work my way backwards, but then the Bitty Bulldogs isn't open for like open enrollment within our district. Those are seats that are funded through the Preschool Promise Grant, and the South Coast Early Learning Hub identifies those students and fill those seats for us. And they're really serving the families really experiencing situations of high poverty and high needs. A lot of the students are being served through the local ESD for various learning disabilities, and so they're students that we're providing services for preschool for students who wouldn't normally get them in our region. So that's when they asked us to open that second one up, because they already had a list of kids they wanted to send to us for that too. So that helps us in that sense, also helps just the whole region in general for those students. In terms of the students, like when they're coming in from other areas, we don't know if they don't start off in our district, like where they're going. So before they're enrolled in public school with us, like if they make a decision to go to one of the other options, we might not know that. But if they're with us and they leave to go to one of those other options, that's what we've been tracking, going back to Rodney's question. So we do know when they end up going to like maybe a school up the river or one of the other options, how many of them are leaving for those types of options. And I believe they just expanded K-12, or maybe K-10.
Their high school option is essentially online support.
Okay. And then in terms of the budget too, we were fortunate with a very positive working relationship with our certified union. We were able to go through the negotiations with only 3 meetings and come to an agreement. But when we're building the budget, we don't know that that's going to be the outcome either. So that's another thing too, that when we're trying to project what we kind of think is going to happen, with no certainty, but it just so happens we finish those negotiations and we're able to build a budget accordingly. So, but knowing that we're in order to maintain, so we can, but we're going to eat through 3.8 million in reserves, getting us down to that 4.2, which would mean the next year after that, we would go into the negative completely, and we'd have no ending fund balance. So Clearly with the reduction in student enrollment, we would have to somehow adjust through attrition in order to prevent that from happening. And we are seeing those numbers now, just kind of getting finalized where we're gonna start off the year.
So as the enrollments decline, when you guys track it, project it, do you guys do the same things with like programs like sports and choir, National Honor Society, and project like how many kids are gonna be going into those, and like are the numbers enrolled in or participating in sports and things like that declining? In the same way that attendance is, or in a steeper amount?
That's a great question. I mean, I would say since COVID, the participation rates have probably increased. And then we're offering more things, like there's emerging sports that have been added to the lineup, so there's some more options for kids too.
So I was watching the board meeting from last time, and they had the National Honor Society who was there, and so do they have is their coach funded for that? Like, I was just curious about like, you know, are they treated like sports?
Now they are. That was one of our, in our negotiation, we talked about the fact that like National Honor Society and OBOB, the Oregon Battle of the Books, though they actually go out and do these competitions. So they're more than just a club. They actually compete. So they were added to the appendix, same chart as the coaches are on.
Okay,
Yeah.
It seemed good because, you know, just watching the
Big.
presentation, you know, it seemed like they'd done a great job.
They
You want to
still-
encourage more.
Yeah, they did.
That was amazing.
Yeah, and I honestly didn't know that there were that many competitions. So yeah, very much deserve to be honored like that.
And in terms of participation, we report that to OSAA every year as part of our athletic director responsible to do that. And I feel pretty good about where we're at with our participation rates in sports. We see a lot of schools around us, a lot of schools across the state that have had sharp increases in their participation. And we've had some decline. We haven't had decline that I'd like to see. Our football program, and I say football because there's so many kids, our football program still has enough kids out there that like when we go up against our opponents, it's not like we have this little group on one side and they've got this big group on the other. We have good participation in volleyball. Our track participation still seems to be good. Our basketball participation hasn't dropped off as much. A few years ago, we ran 4 teams, maybe 2, maybe 1, and then varsity, like a freshman, JV1, JV2
Those are
varsity, and now we have 3 teams, essentially we're total.
Yeah.
We have good participation in sports, sports program.
Previous years to compare.
Certified programs, I say, you walk into that room after school and it's filled with people. So, I feel really good about where we are, especially considering what I see across the state. So, those things are going pretty well. And then not just like we were talking about, not just the sports in the part of the athletics, but we still see good participation in co-curricular activities like bands and choirs and things like that, as well as other kinds of after school activities. And enough to even, like Tim said, emerging sports, you know, our boys volleyball team just won a match the other day. And flag football for girls, we're out competing and we've got a home game coming up, 2 home games coming up, gonna go back to back pretty soon. This week or next week?
Tonight, they're tonight.
Tonight. That's why.
When did flag football and men's volleyball get added?
They are officially emerging sports from the OSAA. They did that. We joined this year. I think boys volleyball is a couple years in, and I think girls, the flag football just happened this year. And it's something that OSAA does, this kind of pilot to test the water to see if we can build up enough momentum. I think that flag football is gonna explode.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna explode. Our only concern is if it does, it can impact softball and track. because there are only so many kids, but right now we're allowing kids to play play flag football. They're not necessarily practicing every day from 3 to 5, 3:30 to 4, to 5:30. So, kids can do both, but I just think flag football's.
What's the limit on kids to practice?
Their OSAA establishes all of those kind of practice, rules, I think, but kids who are allowed to participate in bowl. That it's kind of the
Yeah.
family and the kid
Oh, okay.
and school, really, how they handle that. Some schools will say no participating bowl, those schools will allow it to some level or another.
Okay.
Sometimes it's easier like cross country, I mean, they're football players and volleyball players that will decide they're gonna run cross country and they'll go to a couple of meets so that they're fast enough and they can potentially make it safe, but it just depends on the school.
Page 126 will show you our projected participation, but as we're talking that, I mean, we just wrote down here, it'd be nice next year to kind of have like the actuals, kind of like a budget. Like, what are the actual participation rates
Yeah.
based on what?
I have no clue.
I mean, you'd have to go back to the previous budget book, right, to see what we projected, but it wouldn't show you your actual participation, so that'd be a good thing. And we always, there is, you know, we put the anticipated number of coaches, but build in enough in case we need to add 1 or 2 extra, and we try to do that, you know, in a couple different categories like teaching too, because like I said, the state isn't like on the spot with your money if your student enrollment increases, but you might need to provide a teacher unexpected too, but so.
Family events, if I'm wrong, speaking of the emerging sports, because they're emerging, I believe that the coaches are not paid the volunteer positions, is that accurate?
They are next year in the agreement, just like we added the National Honor Society and OBOB. We added a column for emerging sports so that we could ensure that we could find coaches when these opportunities arise for kids.
So what'll happen is, while they're officially an emerging sport, they'll be on a salary schedule for those coaches that are specific to that. And as soon as those sports move out into the non-emerging category, then they will, and it's part of our bargaining agreement, they'll move into a category that best fits the amount of time that's invested and the number of, I say time, sense of, you know, like volleyball is a 10-week sport, basketball is a 20-week sport, it feels like it's forever. Right, so, but those are the kind of differences to take into consideration that plug them into the right column. And those are negotiated with the bargaining.
I do have a question on another subject, and it's regarding benefits and is insurance how you guys kept it relatively flat for as long as you have, is amazing given the huge jumps in health insurance. But the other one is the PERS, and I know I'm thinking 10 to 20 years down the road, the tier 1 people that will no longer be here in 20 years, the tier 2s that are not far behind. Our tier 3 first people, are we adding anything into their retirement, or is it just the standard tier 3s where it's basically organ saves? Just out of my curiosity.
There is the tier 3 component, and they're broken down in the budget book as far as what we're paying into those plans on page 53. As far as extra goes, that would be up to the employee to add to like a 403B, for example. And then there is a negotiated amount, a match in the agreement for certified. Not classified has not negotiated for that, and
Thank you.
so they do have that option as
I
well.
did skip over that.
Yeah,
I apologize.
that's okay. Yeah, and then of course, our contribution rates to employees' insurance plans are also negotiated in our agreements. So moving into next school year, we didn't add to that dollar increase, dollar amount. It stayed the same.
Will just throw out a kudos to, I track CPE programs from Northern California all the way through Washington and North Bend and all the way from Marshall in there. Just our area really does well with CTE. And,
Oh, yeah.
awesome on that. I'd love to raise the budget on that, but that's a professional stance.
Yeah, our CT programs are very important.
I'll give you $1. I said, go lobby Salem. Good luck, I'll give you $1.
Just, that's what I was doing.
Were you really? Thank you. Did it work?
Well, it
I
wasn't
guess I
about the
owe you $1.
CTE program.
Okay.
I would encourage you to look over this and type up your questions in an email or send them to us or give one of us, the three, 4 of us a call. We'll write them down and have them answered for you at the next meeting. Yep.
So the Bitty Bulldogs, that's completely funded by different.
Preschool Promise.
So
Grant.
those students, there is no money coming from the state for those students.
Correct.
Why can't
Well,
they-
we get the grant money from the state, but they don't get the state school fund money. That's a great thing to point out, yeah. So you don't see them in the enrollment number as far as state school fund revenue goes. You only see the revenue in the grant fund based on the grant that we received from Preschool Promise.
Someday it could be different when there's money available, but as of now.
Yeah, if Preschool Promise wasn't in existence, we wouldn't have any revenue source for it, so then we would have to think about how we would fund that if we were to continue that. Yeah. Yeah, as these programs grow and bigger, like other districts that run Preschool Promises, as they get successful and get moving, they're able to add slots and then charge for them so that more community members can participate in it, but we're not to that stage yet.
Well, I think that we have done enough for tonight, so I think we're ready to take a recess and we will meet back here in a week from today. Okay.
So just for I'd like to thank the budget team for everything you've read
Bravo.
for hearing this.
You're all, you guys are so good.
So I went to New York, I'm not a trustee person. It shows, that's okay, but over the years, I gotta say, I trust the work you guys do, I appreciate that. So our homework assignment, Jim, we want to have questions, and then Jeff Richards, do you already submit your homework? Thank you for that.
Extra points for Jeff.
By the 14th?
14th would be the deadline in order to make sure we can answer them on time. Of course, we'll still try.
And you'd like those questions sent to.
There is an email listed. You can send them directly to any one of us. They'll be on the docket.
Perfect.
Yeah, and yes, thank you, Jim, Lorraine Sullivan, Anna Bergmeyer. Appreciate everything you do all year long and putting this together.
Okay.
It's on the last page.
Okay.